Hello and welcome to Leadership Conversations on behalf of Women Automotive Network. I'm your host today. My name is Micha Goebig. I'm a confidence and leadership coach for women in male-dominated industries and owner of a bilingual communications agency for German car makers and the supplier industry. Today, I am super excited to be talking to Penny Weatherup, People Director of Volkswagen Group UK. Penny, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Welcome. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Penny, maybe you can tell our audience first a little bit more about yourself. I just mentioned your job title, so maybe you can add a little to that.
Yeah, sure. So, my name's right. It's Penny Weatherup. I'm the People Director for Volkswagen Group UK. I've been with the organisation 16 years, always in the people function, as we call it now. And I was promoted to HR Director as part of the Board of Management for 6 years. I'm based very near where we work. Our offices are based in Milton Keynes. I'm very lucky. I live close to my work. And I mostly enjoy, just from a personal perspective, spending time with my husband and my family. And I'm really quite excited because I think at the end of this month, fingers crossed, I shall be going on my first holiday abroad for a few days in Portugal, which is obviously, as with many of us, the first time that I'll have been out of the country for quite some time, and hopefully getting some sunshine, because here in the UK, I'm just looking out my window there, the weather is still very changeable.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I'm in Seattle. I think we have pretty much the same weather as you do in London. That's very similar. And the first time after all these years getting back into the sun and traveling, we are so grateful now, aren't we? Something very special now. Yeah. So
precisely.
Definitely have a great getaway.
I will, thank you.
Before we really dive into the topic of leadership, I would like to know when you joined Women Automotive Network, why it was important to you to join a women-focused automotive group?
Precisely because we are underrepresented at a senior level, particularly in the automotive industry. Because I've worked in the automotive industry now for 16 years, as I've said, and I really relish the opportunity to be able to meet other females and learn from them, but also hopefully be able to make a difference to them about how they feel about their careers and maybe give some advice, a bit of mentoring, some coaching, because I really believe the automotive industry is a fabulous sector and industry to be in. And the fact that we are underrepresented at a senior level, I think, is something that we really need to shine a light on, because the automotive industry is missing out by not having greater diversity at the more senior level, particularly as we go through a huge amount of transformation. So that was one of the main reasons for wanting to join this network. One of the other reasons is that it's an international organisation, and the networks that I belong to are more UK focused, and I've had real pleasure in exchange and hearing different perspectives from women from all different nationalities working across the globe, really. So that was the other very attractive thing about it for me.
Yeah, also that resonates with me, because I feel sometimes, even though I'm based in the US, sometimes you don't need people outside of the automotive industry who are not like European or like Europe based. And so it's like, oh yeah, of course, they make cars everywhere. And this is interesting. And there's a supplier there. And this international perspective, in addition to the focus on females, it's so important. And I think I really feel like with this huge transformation the automotive industry is seeing, the main point of that huge transformation is still, it's people. It's always people. Despite all the interesting things going on in mobility, in technology, it's people. So as you are the people director of your organization, let's come back to the pandemic first again. How are you working with employees' demands now, as we're sort of coming out of at least the the worst of the pandemic, because now people have a bit of a different work experience, as yourself too. How are you dealing with those expectations, demands that are coming up now?
Yeah, really. We're in the same, I'm really honest, we're actually finding our way a little bit with it, because it is such a different world than the world we left at the beginning of 2020 when we all first went into lockdown. So we're focusing particularly on things that we know are important to our employees post-pandemic and as a result of the pandemic. So flexibility is key, and we want to make sure that we are providing particularly women with opportunities to work flexibly. So that more traditionally is around part-time, but certainly job share at a senior level I think is ever more important. But working patterns as well, suddenly the requirement for even more flexibility on working patterns. So we've put in place smart working and hybrid working, and we have a guide and a policy that ensures our managers are well briefed on how to support their teams with that. We've continued to focus on well-being, because although the pandemic has sort of passed, we know that the COVID rates are pretty high. I've just had it myself, you know.
Oh
yeah,
no. Hope you're okay.
Yes, all fine, thank you. Thank goodness for the vaccinations. I wouldn't have wanted it without the vaccination, I have to say.
No.
But we know that it's there still, and we've got to take care of people and respect that. But also we need to keep our business going. So we put protocols in place. We still have protocols in place to encourage people to make sure that they look after themselves. I think the presenteeism that we've had for a long time in offices has lifted a little bit. So, you know, whether you've got COVID or whether you're just under the weather, don't force yourself to be in the office. Actually, rest is important. You need to do that to get better quickly. So you come back firing on all cylinders. So those are the things that we've really been focusing on. And then, of course, there's some broader macro impact for us, which we might talk about in a bit anyway, but things like the employment markets and the economic environment. You know, clearly it's not necessarily all related to the pandemic, of course, but the flow through from that is certainly having an impact on how we operate as well.
Right. So before we dive into that, I would love for our audience to find out a little bit more about your career development, because I think a lot of people, when someone reaches a senior level, the winding path that might have led there is not really that much talked about. And I think that's actually the interesting piece. So if you would share a little bit about how you got to where you am today.
Sure, yeah. Yes, it's not been a straight path. I don't think any career is necessarily a straight path. And also, we all talk about having career aspirations. I didn't for a minute think when I was starting out on my career that I was going to end up as a people director. In fact, you know, it wasn't even on my horizon. So my career started in hospitality, and I love, you know, I've always loved working with customer, and I loved that about the hospitality industry. So I started in hospitality. At a young age of around 25, was opening a hotel, a small hotel and pub restaurant. I did that for a couple of years because I'll be really honest, I realized at that point in time I didn't think I was going to progress my career particularly quickly as a female in the hospitality industry, and I didn't also see the opportunity to let's say get the maximum, optimize my earnings potential at that time. So a bit of a pattern with my career. I left and I took an administrative role, and I joined a financial services company, which is a very strong financial services company. I worked as an administrator, and I worked my way up through from that. I always worked in sales, in the sales team. I wasn't a salesperson, but in the sales team. And I stayed with that organisation, which was now called AXA, for 11 years. I loved it, but wanted to move on. But that was where I moved into my first HR role. And I studied for my HR qualification whilst working and not being in an HR team, and then had to knock on the door a couple of times to get into the HR department, which was one of my challenges, but got in there in the end. And then when I finally left there, I set up an HR team from a greenfield site within within a law practice that specialised in intellectual property. And then from there, I'd met my who is my partner, who is now my husband, and that's another thing, that life events do come along as well, you know, so it's not all about your career. So I decided to move back to where he was from, which is where we live now. But I didn't have a job to go to. I just decided to take a bit of a risk. I was going to take a bit of time out. And I was contacted by an agency telling me about a role at Volkswagen Group. I didn't even know Volkswagen Group was in Milton Keynes. So, of course, it mentioned the name Volkswagen, and even for me at that time, that was quite impressive. And I took a role on a 4-day week because they hadn't got enough budget to play for a full-time role on a 6-month contract. So temporarily thought, okay, that will be fine. I'll make my way here. And as is often the way with these things, one thing leads to another. And, you know, I'm still here 16 years later, and in the role that I definitely didn't have on my aspirational list when I first joined Volkswagen.
That is such an inspiring story. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. By the way, I am only in Seattle. I always joke that I'm the only person in Seattle who did not come for a job with a big tech company, because my husband lived in Seattle when we re-met. We had met in the 90s. So that's how life, it's not all about work and career. And sometimes the good things happen right when you take a brave, courageous decision for your personal life.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'd recommend it. Everything always works out.
Yeah. So we've talked a little about the challenges and people's expectations right now, but you being in charge of the DEI activities, what makes you hopeful? What makes you optimistic? Where do you see progress already? Because there is a lot, right?
There is a lot of progress, and I think sometimes we forget to celebrate that. Actually, I think in our eagerness to see the visible results of, you know, more females at a senior level, or greater diversity, ethnicity diversity, whichever the representation is, we sometimes forget that. The big driver in our organisation is, with all the things that we do, we're creating an environment that's inclusive. So, because if people feel that they belong, no matter what their background is, whether it's around gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ, whichever it is, then we have the best chance of attracting the most exciting talent into the organisation, because we need automotive industries been around for a long time, and we really do need those different ways of thinking, and being able to bring in some innovative, different ideas. And I personally love it when we get someone from outside the automotive industry join us, because they are so refreshing. And I had someone just a year ago join my own team from outside the automotive industry, and it's been enlightening. It's just great, and you forget how internal you can be. You need to be out there externally scanning the horizons. So that gives me real hope that the culture is changing. I think most organisations are changing to create that inclusivity, and I think that's really really hopeful. And I know that it has a fantastic response from employees. The other things that give me hope, we've recently just appointed a DE&I partner into the people team. That is a big step forward for us, because again, we've brought somebody in that knows more about the topic than we might proclaim to know. Which is good. I think that's a really healthy thing to do. So we're bringing someone in that's going to be able to guide us and support us, and therefore hopefully help us accelerate the difference in terms of representation. Although she's already made it very clear that whilst in a sales organisation, we're very quarter by quarter, half year by half year, year end, and then we're into the next year with our sales targets. That's not how improving your diversity representation will work. You can't nail it in the same way that you can nail a sales target. So she's already been saying to me, you know, Penny, this is incremental, and I know that instinctively, but I'm just so impatient to see the change. But that for me is incredibly hopeful, because I think a couple of years ago, we as an organisation, might not have been as open to making that change, in terms of bringing in that expertise. And then the other the other piece of transparency that we've opted for this year, you'll know that obviously we have to publish the gender pay gap report, but we've chosen to go early with our ethnicity pay gap report as well. So we've done the two things at the same time. Transparency is accountability, it leads to accountability. So if we put it out there, then we're being very honest about where we are now. We know we're not anywhere near where we want to be and where we should be if we compare those representative numbers to society, but at least we're saying we know. And sometimes if you put that level of transparency out there, others will be encouraged to join, I hope, because they would want to come and make a difference and be part of that journey. So for me, that's those three things I think probably give me hope that we're making progress, and with the caveat as well that we should celebrate more.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems like everybody, it's just human nature to beat yourself up when something doesn't go right, but we often forget, and that's so important, to celebrate the things that actually go wrong and the things that actually work out. Sorry, now I do that again. No, we really should celebrate the things that work out well, because that tells our brain, wow, that's good, I can do more of that. That actually gives me some reward. So yes, and there is a lot to celebrate, even though there's still a long road ahead. But that sounds fantastic.
And I think these networks, and there's several of them, well, several isn't there, different networks, and I think whichever ones I attend, I always feel incredibly uplifted by them. And energized by them. So I think the community, in this instance, the community of women that come together to give support for each other and want to listen and learn and exchange stories and support for one another, I think that is inspirational, and I would have loved that to have been available when I was much younger. I think I think it's a great opportunity for all women to get involved with this kind of support network and exchange.
Agreed. There's a lot more going on, just like very open conversations. Also, just this idea of sending the elevator back down, mentoring, that is really a fantastic development that can give us all hope for the change. But as your expert says, incremental. So it'll be a while. It will be a while. So we also mentioned already that there are so many things going on in the automotive industry, mobility industry. What do you consider the most exciting trend right now? So where's the attraction of the mobility automotive industry versus tech, like big tech?
Good. That's a great question. I think that we've got a number of things coming together in the automotive industry at the moment, which make it super exciting. So, of course, we manufacture cars and vans and trucks and those and everything vehicular. And some people will always be attracted to that because they are particularly interested in cars. I think the difference now, though, is that it's broadening its attraction so much so to different sectors. So if you think about it, part of our transformation is about electrification. I mean, it's a huge part of us. Obviously, it's battery electric cars. We have, I think by 2030, we will only be producing electric vehicles. We've got an amazing lineup, I think, of electric vehicles now. As an organisation, and that in itself is so exciting. So it might have taken the automotive sector some time to get here, but we're absolutely committed to the Paris Climate Agreement. We've got net zero carbon emissions targets, etc. So I think there's a contribution that the automotive sector is making to the wider external world and society that it hasn't been able to do or hasn't been seen to do in the past. And I think that's very attractive to a lot of people. I know it's certainly attractive to me from a sustainability and an environmental perspective. You can really start to see how we're making that impact. So there's the electrification. There's then also the focus on connectivity. So that's a global term really. We're all connected these days, but our products and our services will be moving much more to IT software enabled services as part of the vehicle, as part of the car. So it already is, we already do have a good level of connectivity in our cars. But if you imagine at some point where we will be autonomous driving, because that's on the cards as well, people will be able to connect and have conversations and do things, active things whilst not driving, because the car will be driving themselves. So suddenly a whole other world wakes up. So that digitization, connectivity, placing the customer at the center of everything we do, and sometimes sadly that hasn't always been as placed as centrally as it could have been in the automotive sector, it means that we're pulling together lots of different threads. And whilst the tech industry is super important to us and it's part of what we will become, I think the exciting part for us is that we're using that to enable our future in a different way to other sectors, because it's part of our traditional approach, even though the traditional approach is changing, which is mobility. It's part of keeping connected and making life easy for ourselves. And I think that within all of that, how we interact with our customers then changes, because, you know, it becomes an online experience rather than an experience where at the moment people always go to into a retailer. So we'll have a dual way of distributing to and selling to our customers.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that so exciting. When I think back about how when I did my driver's license, I didn't even have power steering in my first car. And eventually, very soon, I will just sit there and do something else while driving. And actually, you closed the circle quite nicely here, because as I said in the very beginning, it's all about people. So if you're the people director, it's a lot about employees and attracting talent and retaining talent and ensuring people's health and well-being. And then on the other end, of course, of that cycle is the customer and their demands, and mobility being at the nexus of their work and private life and pretty much everything, right? So it is all about the people.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask one more specific thing right now as we move to the end of our conversation. Do you have a piece of advice specifically for women interested in making the transition into the automotive industry, or young women fresh out of school who are contemplating the idea and are maybe a little scared of this very male-dominated industry?
Yeah, I would say do the research, and I would also say, if anyone's watching this and they're not part of a network group, join a network group, because that was never available to me when I was starting out on my career. Just these things just didn't exist. But had they existed, it would have given me the opportunity to explore what my career might be able to look like, even if it was going to take a different track at different times, and ask questions and really get under the skin about what it is that's changing in the automotive sector, and use other platforms like LinkedIn to connect with different people, again, about connectivity, and research what is available that might appeal. And the old-fashioned views of automotive are so different. It's so different now, you know. So it would have been you know, parts, engines, oil, fuel, the car itself, great, but typically not always the same, but not always seen as attractive for women, but it is completely different. So, you know, we've got changes happening in marketing. Customer data is at the center of everything that we do. Insights is incredibly important. Our sales proposition is changing, and there's nothing more exciting, I don't think, than being able to interface directly with customers and be involved in that dialogue. The tech and the data landscape is changing, around which we build in order to drive the future forward. And I would say as well, then you can look at anybody interested should look outside of just the group, because quite often automotive industries have investments and interests in other areas that are not, you might be surprised about, that are not directly connected to making cars. You know, so investment in making in developing and constructing battery power, you know. Other investments around mobility schemes, city mobility schemes, things that are investments that are about protecting the environment. All of that is involved in the automotive sector in today's world, where it just wasn't previously. So I think, or have an open mind is what I would say, have a really open mind in considering the sector that you might want to work in, but particularly within the automotive sector, you have to peel back the layers of the onion really sometimes just to get to the real heart of what the automotive sector is about. It's a fascinating industry and very rewarding one to work in as well.
I love that. Explore, research, connect. Yeah, that's a wonderful approach. Last question. Knowing what you know today, what piece of advice would you give your own 16-year-old self?
I would say be brave. When I was 16, I was lacking in confidence. I think you know, it's now known as imposter syndrome, but back then it probably would have been a bit about imposter syndrome. I was very doubtful about my capabilities, and I think I hate to feel anyone feels like that. Of course, it's human nature, but I hate to feel that anyone feels like that. And so I would definitely say, be brave. Don't be afraid to take those steps. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, and also don't be afraid to follow your own path, because I think in today's world, there's so many opportunities to follow your own path and not necessarily have to follow a very well-trodden path that might have been the way 10, 20 years ago, because the world has changed so much. There's so much opportunity there, and it applies to the automotive industry equally as it does apply to any other sector.
Exactly. It's there's so much opportunity. That's really the thing. It is very, very exciting. Penny, thank you for sharing all that with us today. It was wonderful talking to you. And for the audience, thank you for watching. If you have any questions to the Women Automotive Network, to Penny, you can drop them in the comments and someone will get back to you soon. Thanks again and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.